Bring in co-founder and executive chairman of Strive and author of the book Nation of Victims, Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek, great to see you. Thank you for being here. So it appears at least that Twitter or Elon Musk and Tim Cook have kind of buried this suggestion that Tim Cook was going to actually take Twitter off of the App Store. He last night wrote out a Twitter himself saying, good conversation. Among other things, we resolved the misunderstanding about Twitter potentially being removed from the App Store. Tim was clear that Apple never considered doing so. That's what Elon Musk said last night. Where did the rumor come from then that he was going to take it off the App Store?
So look, Elon Musk is a mercurial man. He was clearly concerned about it, but I will tell you that the concern is not a theoretical one. This was one that played out last year with Apple, which removed Parler from the App Store.
Right.
And for those users who might then want to use the Google Play Store to get it on their Android devices, it turns out that Google did the exact same thing. And I think that is the real problem in Silicon Valley today. It is this ideological cartel engaged not in price fixing, but in idea fixing. And so I'm glad to hear that isn't going to be the case for Twitter. The reality is that Twitter is such a large platform that Apple probably calculates that the backlash they would face, including from lawmakers and regulators, might be so bad that it may not be worth it. But this is not a theoretical concern. This is a real world concern here in the United States, where I'm sorry to say that Apple has adopted somewhat of a consistent position. You would say standing for censorship here in the United States, standing equally for censorship in China, where its real bread is buttered. And I think that's the real issue.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about China, but I want to first talk about what's happening here. David Sachs, as I'm sure you heard, says that there's now this new Democratic MAGA. It's Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Amazon. That's the new MAGA from Silicon Valley that he talks about, and they collude together, which would be bad enough. And of course, usually politicians are worried about monopolistic collusion, but they're colluding now with the government. And it's even that combination is just deadly.
I have been writing about this for nearly 2 years. When I first started writing about it in the pages of the Wall Street Journal in January of 2021, it was dismissed as a conspiracy theory. Right. Now it has almost become a mundane observation of everyday reality. Government is using technology companies and using the private sector to do through the back door what government could not get done through the front door under the Constitution, and that includes censoring political viewpoints. And I will say that if the framers of the First Amendment would shudder at one thing, it would be the idea that the U.S. government would use its power to silence critics of the U.S. government. That is exactly what the White House is doing today. It actually comes to light now that the White House was using Twitter, was collaborating with pre-Elon Twitter to silence specific critics of the government. This is the stuff of our founding fathers, from George Washington to even going back to George Orwell, doing backflips in their graves today. Right. At what we see today playing out through this backdoor activity via the private sector. Well,
and now they're suggesting, we had from Janet Yellen yesterday, suggesting that they may try to kill the whole company by using CFIUS, which is an organization that she heads up as Treasury Secretary, to find out whether there's any national security concerns about Twitter. That might totally derail the company. To use the regulatory power of CFIUS to get rid of Twitter is even more insidious, I would think.
Well, look, I think there are national security concerns with Apple.
Yeah,
this is a company that,
right,
when the CCP says jump, Apple will ask how high. And here's the reason why. Their entire supply chain, not just to access the Chinese market, but even the U.S. market, depends on China. This is why Tim Cook is effectively a puppet of the CCP, is a puppet of Xi Jinping, relentlessly criticizing alleged social injustice here in the United States without literally, and you just saw it in that clip you played before this interview, without saying a peep about the actual human rights atrocities that their own technology helps subsidize.
And there's another
in
clip.
China. That's a problem.
I want to play another clip, Vivek. This is from Martha McCallum's interview with John Kirby yesterday, in which she mentioned the fact that, hey, you guys are okay with what Apple's doing in China, but you say the national security threat is with Twitter here in the United States. Let me roll that tape and get your impression. Go ahead.
Because we were just told the other day that the White House is keeping an eye on Elon Musk and Twitter. So why would you say that from the podium? You didn't say it, but Karine Jean-Pierre said it, and not call Apple out for helping the Chinese government to suppress their own people's ability to communicate?
Again, I think we've been very clear and consistent on this. Certainly publicly, we've been very open about our desires to be able to see citizens communicate. And you know, Apple, if this is a decision that they're making, then they should have to speak to that. But we're not, we can't, and we aren't in the business of telling private companies how to execute their initiatives.
Yeah, but Twitter's a private company too. So why is Twitter getting one treatment and Apple's getting another? Is my question.
Well, these are completely two different circumstances.
Boy, Martha really nailed him, didn't she?
She really did. And I also want to be clear that I don't want to be asymmetric in my concerns either. I have concerns about Tim Cook and Apple jumping to the tune of the CCP like a circus monkey. I have my concerns about Elon Musk as well. I mean, he has made comments in recent weeks about Taiwan that I found highly problematic, saying that it should annex itself as a special administrative region of China. But I think this is a broader problem with American capitalism, where China is deputizing American companies. That's the gun they have to the head of American capitalists, to say that you can't actually do business in China or get favors from the CCP if you say something unfavorable about the CCP. But I think it is preposterous to see the asymmetry of the White House's standards to be able to scrutinize Twitter, to be able to interfere with private companies, to tell them who they are supposed to censor on the internet. That has actually happened when they actually look the other way when it comes to more favored darlings like Apple and Google.
Well, speaking of favored darlings, Vivek, and we don't have much time for this, but we had this display yesterday of Sam Bankman-Fried, the guy behind FTX, who clearly was totally mismanaging the company at the very least. At worst, he was using investors' money that they thought was tied up in their crypto to make horrible bets or even just to pocket the money. I mean, there are all kinds of charges out there. But he had this platform. CNBC broadcasted it. It was the New York Times thing. And you had people like Kevin O'Leary, Bill Aikman saying, gee, we thought he was telling the truth about what he did. What is this whole process about? I mean, we know that this guy was paying off people inside the Beltway to steer clear of looking at his accounts too closely. Is that continuing now as he's getting the royal treatment by some quarters?
He was doing what leaders of financial institutions in this country do too often. He was buying protection. He was buying an insurance policy. The question now is whether his insurance policy pays out. He gave over $30 million to Democrats in the last cycle alone, okay? Is that going to pay out or not? We will see soon. But I do think, David, it's important to remember that he is not alone. And in a certain sense, he's getting all the attention today. Keep in mind, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, they all got their share of bailouts on the back of the 2008 financial crisis. They bought their insurance policies. Theirs paid out. The younger guy today, now following in their footsteps. Let's see if he did a good enough job. And the funniest irony in all of it is that he actually pledged to give over $1 billion over 2 cycles to Democrats. So in some corridors, people are actually mad at him for not actually living up to that obligation. So in the end, that may be why the insurance policy doesn't play out, because he actually didn't buy the gold-plated
But, you know,
version
to see him getting applause and laugh lines, the guy ripped off a million Americans may have put money in that they'll never get back into their accounts. I mean, there was nothing funny about a million Americans getting ripped off.
This is not a joking matter, and I hope, most on a serious note, that we learn from it this time around.
Yeah.
The people who pretend to be virtuous and want to regulate their own industries run in the other direction and scrutinize their motives. That's the lesson of the day.
Vivek Ramaswamy, always a pleasure to see you, Vivek. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.